Hello there, my name is Mooseman, and today we are going to be cooking a delicious Hungarian dish called letcho. If you've never heard of letcho, it is a Hungarian pepper, onions, and sausage stew, as you see the ingredients before you, and is a great introductory dish if you're interested at all in Hungarian cooking or just delicious cooking in general. So while this is all the ingredients you will need to cook your delicious meal, the entire recipe and all the precise measurements are in the description below. Alright, so the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need a grease. So in this and most Hungarian dishes, you're going to want to use bacon. And I'm using about 3 strips of bacon, but make sure it's thicker bacon. If you're using, a thin bacon, you may want to put 4 or 5 strips in, but just make sure it's, quite a significant amount of bacon because you're going to be cooking your ingredients in the grease that comes off of this bacon. So this is a very important step to get right. So just cut it into, small chunks, about 1/2 inch wide. It's not really, it doesn't need to be exact. Actually, that's part of most of this recipe is none of it really needs to be exact. So you're going to want to preheat a medium to large pot to about medium, and you'll probably keep the temperature on medium for the duration of this recipe. So once your pan is nice and warm, throw your bacon in and listen to that sizzle. That's one of the best parts of this recipe. Any recipe that involves bacon is getting that sizzle. So you're going to want to get all the delicious fat out of the bacon, and that's what you're going to be cooking your vegetables in. You're going to want to cook the bacon to just the point before it becomes very crispy. I mean, you want a little bit of an edge to it, so about 5 minutes, and during this 5 minutes we can go cut up our vegetables. So we're going to start just slicing up our onions. Now you want to slice into little half crescent moon shapes. So because you're going to want to keep the onions stringy when you're eating them. A lot of recipes, when you're cooking onions down, you want to dice it, but in this case we're just going to slice it into, again, half crescent moons. So this will be good. You want about 2 medium onions or 1 very large onion. The onions are pretty important to the flavor, so don't, make sure, I cut this wrong. Don't make sure it's actually a decent amount of onion that you're putting in here. Again, 2 medium is usually good enough. So next we're going to put a little bit of a hotter pepper in here. This is a medium hot white pepper. You can use any hot pepper you want, but really you want one of these white peppers is ideal. We're going to take the core out here real quick. This dish is not specifically going to be extremely hot. Like, you don't want it to be really spicy, but having a little bit of heat on top of the flavor really adds just a little more layer of complexity to it. So we'll just cut it up, and so you'll see in the center of these that there's a rind, and if you're not really a fan of like wanting it to be really hot, then you're definitely going to want to de-rind these. I'm doing it for this. I usually leave them in, but just for the sake of the video, I'll de-rind them. Also, try to get all the seeds out because they won't cook properly. So then just slice it long ways, and then because it's such a long pepper, you're going to slice it in half for these. For the rest of your peppers, we're going to need 2 more, a red and a yellow bell pepper. You're not going to want to slice them in half because they're, you want, again, like the onions, you want them to have long strings of strands of peppers and onions. So just put this in I got a little bowl over here that I'm putting all the vegetables in, because with the peppers and the onions, you're going to put those in at the same time. Now we're going to decore this as well. Just rip this one out. It's not, not too hard. Then you can also save the top here if you want to, a little more pepper. You can just pull that out, and look at that, beautiful. Growing up and as a cook, I've always been taught never to waste food. So anything that's good, I'm going to throw in there. But then we'll just slice it again, just like the other longer pepper. And then with these, again, you're not going to want to slice them off. The rinds are not important to really take out on these. You can if you want to, but it's going to cook down to to the point where you're not even going to be able to notice. The rinds are really only important to remove when you're working with a hotter pepper. So we got our red pepper. So you just want one of each. You know, there's quite a bit of peppers in here. That's one of the main flavors you're working with in this dish is onions and peppers. So, and then just, you know, kind of the same thing. Just cut it up into, you know, thin strips. While you're cutting your vegetables, make sure you keep going back to your bacon, and at this point you can kind of see it's beginning to get a little bit crispy. Now, you don't want it to get too crispy, but this is about the point, if not a little longer. I prefer my bacon to be a little on the more tender side. If you want to make it crispy, that's your own decision, but just as long as there is a layer of grease on the bottom, that is your primary objective. So yeah, let's put all these onions and peppers in here and then immediately start stirring. You're going to want to get all that bacon fat around all the vegetables, so stirring it as soon as you put it in there is kind of important. The vegetables will soak it up, but you want it to be kind of coating all the vegetables. If your bacon didn't provide enough grease to really get your vegetables cooking properly, then you might want to add a little bit of olive oil to it, but again, that's the important thing is, you know, try to get it with the bacon, because the bacon flavor is actually kind of important to this recipe. So with that, we're just gonna let the vegetables stew for a little while. This is about 5 minutes later. We've got, you know, they're starting to get a little bit thinner. We're definitely wanting, this is not going to be, you know, you don't want them to brown. You want them to stew down. This is a stew, so. At this point, I forgot to show it, but you also want to add a tablespoon or 2 cloves of garlic and a single bouillon cube. You don't want to add broth, like a full liquid broth, but adding a single bouillon cube right now will really help enhance the sauce's flavor. While you're waiting for your onions and peppers to stew down, it's time to cut up the tomatoes. Since tomatoes are a little softer, you don't need to put them in with the onions and peppers. In fact, you don't want to, because it's going to add a lot of liquid to the dish, and they won't really cook properly in the bacon grease. So just, you know, dice them up any way you see fit. It's not, you know, no real need to be too technical on this, but you want to try to get as much out of these tomatoes as possible. You could add, and as I was saying earlier with the peppers and onions, this is not really a big measurement. I like to use, you know, 4 these Roma tomatoes. You can also just use a full can of diced tomatoes if you're, you know, if you don't have access to good fresh tomatoes, or just, you know, too lazy to cut them up. But so just dice them up real nice. And alright, so yeah, our vegetables are looking pretty good. Our onions are starting to get glossy, but we're going to cook them even past that. But now it's time to start working with liquid. Now, liquid is very important in this recipe, so let's add our main source of liquid, and pretty much the only source of liquid, which is tomatoes. This recipe is all about balancing the liquid and keeping the liquid inside the pan, unlike my tomatoes, which I dropped several of. So let's mix these tomatoes up in there. And oh yeah, it's starting. This is the beginning of the red color. So this dish has a very distinct red color to it, and that starts with, again, the peppers and the tomatoes. So you see our onions are starting to get very pretty translucent. That's you know, about where we want them to be at the moment. As soon as you add the tomatoes and you have it all stirred up and coated with that bacon grease, you want to cover it immediately, because you don't want to lose any of the liquid. The liquid is going to make your sauce, and if you don't have to add liquid later, it's going to be significantly better. The one last thing we are going to add is a little bit of tomato paste, not a whole can, just, you know, we got a little small can here, just about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Just to add a little more of that tomato flavor, and also to get, you know, some more red color. But it's a beautiful red color to this dish that it makes it, you know, such a nice dish to present. You're not going to use the whole can. It's okay. If you want to use more, if you like, you know, the tomatoey flavor, you can add a little bit more. I wouldn't recommend adding too much to it though. So, but we'll just mix that in there all nice and. So we don't really have a sauce yet. The tomatoes were just in there a minute ago, so. So yeah, we'll just mix it a little bit more and then cover it up immediately again, because again, we're trying to save as much of the liquid as possible. At this point in time, you're going to want to let it sit on its own without really stirring it too much, but it's a perfect time to begin making your rice. I'm using jasmine rice in this recipe, but you could use really any kind of white rice. Specifically, you want to use white rice in this recipe. The next thing, and one of the most important things, is paprika. Now you're going to want to use I'm using a smoked and Hungarian. If you just have, regular paprika from the store, that'll be fine. But if you can get some good paprika, it's going to make quite a big difference to the flavor, because this is where the most flavor comes from in this dish is from the paprika. So I'm going to add about, 2 big spoonfuls of it. Not really too much measurement going on in this, but 2 big spoonfuls each. Also, if you're not using traditional Hungarian sausage, and you're like me in this recipe where I'm using just Kolbasz, you want to add a little bit more paprika, because there's no paprika inherent in the sausage. So yes, we're gonna mix it up. You can see the liquid starting to form, and it's actually important that you wait until there is a little bit of liquid in the pot before you add the paprika, because paprika will burn very quickly. I'm gonna season it up with a little bit of Lowry seasoning salt. If you don't have seasoning salt, that's okay. You can just add a little bit of, just regular salt as well. Don't overdo it though, just a little bit of salt, a teaspoon or so. Teaspoon to a tablespoon. Then mix that in there, and that's pretty much it for the vegetable portion of this. Now we wait about 10 to 15 minutes and let it stew down. Again, really what we're trying to do is get the liquid out of our vegetables and into the sauce. So next up, we have the sausage. Now, today I'm just using Polska Kielbasa, because that's what's easy for me to find. But if you have access to it, you're going to want to use Debreceni Kolbasz, because it has paprika in it and it is a Hungarian sausage. But you can substitute it for really any kind of smoked sausage. So if you notice, I'm slicing up the sausage kind of at an angle. This is just for presentation. It's kind of the traditional way of slicing it for presentation. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want the slices to be pretty thin. If you're only using a pound of sausage, it's not going to be a huge amount, especially if you're serving a few people. If you want to add more, then definitely do so. But if you're only using a single pound of sausage, you want to kind of slice it pretty thin. That way every plate gets a decent, number of sausages. So alright, we're not going to add the sausages just yet, but I'm going to check on this, and look at that. You can see the liquid beginning to form. This is about 15 minutes of stewing, so you definitely want to wait until this has happened. If it does not happen, you can add a little bit of water, but don't make it too soupy. You definitely want it to be a sauce and not a soup. See, even when I begin stirring it, it doesn't quite, there's not a huge amount of liquid. You want to keep it to a minimal amount of liquid. Once your vegetables are nice and tender, you can begin to add your sausage. And since the sausage is already cooked, it's pretty much done at this point. You just want to get some of the spices and garlic, mixed into the flavor, and get some of the flavor out of the sausage into the sauce as well. So, and then cover it back up. Again, make sure it's always covered when you're cooking it, because even now you can lose that precious liquid. But now it is done at this point, and we're ready to put it over our rice and eat it. But yeah, look at that red color. You definitely want it to be a very dark red without tomatoes and the paprika and everything. So yeah, just put a bed of rice down. You can also just put it in a bowl. The bowl can be easier, but to show off how, the presentation, you can put it on a plate and make it look all nice and fancy. Make sure your rice is, presentation is very important. Even in a dish, kind of as messy as this one, you definitely want to, present it properly. They got the letcho itself. Let's bring it out and put it over that warm, steamy bed of rice. So yeah, it looks so delicious. It's just, you get the sausage and the peppers and everything just, you know, kind of melds together. You know, add a little more. Make sure every plate has a good amount of sausage on it. You don't want to leave anybody hungry after this. So it's, you know, it's got a nice thick sauce, but it's not, you know, it's very, you can see the red color and everything. It's so delicious. It is definitely one of the first dishes. If you're interested in Hungarian cooking, I highly recommend you try, because it's a very light dish. It just kind of introduces you to the flavor of paprika. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been Hungarian Lecsó. If you have any questions or you want to see the recipe in more precise measurements, the whole recipe is in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more cooking. And if you have a recipe that you would like me to make on the channel, please leave it in the comments below. I appreciate, and I'm looking forward to cooking a whole bunch of new stuff for this channel.